There are some things in both life and in fiction that can aggravate me. Sometimes these are minor aggravations, sometimes they're fairly major. And yet there is at least one thing about YouTube creators in general, at least, some of them, that can occasionally reach above the minor point but not come anywhere near being truly major. I was watching a current events YouTuber I usually enjoy recently and was painfully reminded that sometimes a creator's habits can change for the worst. Sometimes, very rarely, even to the point that watching one of that creator's videos all the way through becomes basically impossible for me. It's not something I like admitting, but this has happened in the past. A creator I enjoy has slowly changed over time to the point I simply can't watch them anymore. There could be many different reasons for this. Some are very understandable, and some really aren't. The most understandable reason for change is basic personal or creative growth. People who make content of almost any variety tend to grow and adapt with their content. In this case, the changes are more often than not positive. The most obvious example of this phenomenon is almost certainly MatPat. I have watched Game Theory from the beginning, and as time went on, MatPat slowly adapted and changed to make the show better over time. A lot of this was technical stuff, but some of it was just MatPat himself getting more comfortable in his role and becoming even more engaging than he was. The second understandable reason is a creator's audience growing older. This one is a razor-sharp double-edged blade. If a creator's audience was very young children who have grown into tweens or teenagers, a creator who overcorrects could likely become more extreme or aggressive in their content in order to maintain that core audience. As it takes a lot more to hold a teenager's attention than a child's. If that creator's audience were tweens or teenagers who have grown into proper adults, then it is possible, even rather likely, that that creator tones down their content and starts mixing more in-depth material into their videos. Because adults, at least in general, have a greater attention span and often lean towards more detailed or nuanced topics, although not always. Sometimes said adults even start leaning into a more thorough or in-depth discussion of the things they enjoyed as children or teenagers. After all, when I was a teenager, my enjoyment of 40K came from the idea of controlling an army, the Gothic-esque military art, and dreadnoughts. In my adulthood, I enjoy learning about the lore and character backstories. Funnily enough, those dreadnoughts I mentioned, when I was younger, I didn't even know their backstory. To me, they were just cool mechs. Now on to somewhat less understandable reasons for creators changing. In these cases, more often than not, for the worse. The first one is chasing trends. It might gain a creator more views, but it can also give their core audience mental whiplash or even fatigue. Trying new things would be fine, especially if you listen to your audience and don't overdo it. Unfortunately, the simple truth is, it's often not done for the benefit of the creator's core audience, rather in an attempt to reach more and more people. And if they're interested in one of these trend-chasing videos, the majority will likely only be sticking around to watch similar videos. Meaning that while a core audience would slowly wander off because your content isn't what they enjoyed anymore, your new audience would be fickle, almost ephemeral. The next slightly less understandable one is, well, desperation. If a creator sees their views lowering over time, they may very well overcorrect, doing anything they can think of to gain more views. And when I say doing anything, I mean it. Some creators will degrade themselves, others will insult their audience, others will attempt to drag other content creators into some kind of feud, others will begin incorporating intentionally annoying or extreme behaviors into their content, others still will seemingly give up and accept the lower numbers, and then you have the sadly rare gems that look at themselves and their content and revitalize their content in a way that brings back their audience. And finally, the least understandable one, for me at least, is getting too comfortable with your audience. Sometimes a creator will get so comfortable with their audience, they stop treating them like an audience who came for information or entertainment, and start treating them like friends. While this is frankly admirable to an extent, it becomes less so when a creator stops seeing that line between their private and professional life, and starts acting like they were actually around a group of close friends instead of an audience. Because there are many things you would do around friends who know you rather well that you would never do in public or around strangers. And if you would never do it around strangers, many people might find it disrespectful for you to behave in that manner around them. After all, it's important to remember just because you see someone as a friend doesn't mean they reciprocate that bond. This is made even more problematic when you start to see a large group as one homogenized entity. Obviously, that's not true for all creators, but it can be very hard to look at anything more than a couple dozen people and see individuals. At that point, it's likely you're just seeing, well, a group. And while I have grown somewhat more comfortable with my relatively small audience, I do make it a point not to do or say anything that I would personally consider disrespectful to my audience. This might sound strange, but if it's something that greatly annoys me personally, you won't find it in any one of my more recent videos. Whether my channel grows at the speed of a sloth, or preferably more rapidly, I would greatly prefer to show my audience, at the bare minimum, the respect and courtesy I would show to any stranger I meet. There are so many creators who act in a manner I personally consider unacceptable. So, to whoever may be listening to this, if I ever act in a manner that you would find disrespectful or antagonizing, please let me know, so I can reevaluate my behavior, or at the very least dial it back to acceptable levels. Oh, one more thing. What I have said about respect and courtesy might sound very odd if you've seen my Bethesda videos and heard my rather obvious digs at both Emil Pagliaro and Todd Howard. The truth is, my problems with both of those individuals is on a professional level, not a personal one. I do not know them personally, nor is it likely to ever really happen. They could both be fine, upstanding people outside of their professional lives for all I know. Which is why you will never hear me insulting them on a personal or emotional level. I will, however, continue to lambaste their professional abilities and choices. I don't consider that disrespectful because every professional, bar none, should be open to criticism. And honestly, those two in particular really aren't. Todd Howard doesn't seem to understand criticism, constructive or otherwise. It often seems like he lives in his own world. And Emil is the kind of person who will go on a massive Twitter rant about people not understanding game development, even though the criticism he seemed to be responding to was about the writing, not the development, I think. That being said, I will say it again. If I ever cross a line of being outright disrespectful or antagonistic to any of my audience, please let me know so I can re-examine my own behavior. Now, since on a topic I consider important, my normal sign-off is unfitting, I'll just say, thank you for listening and have a good day.